Seattle's Morning News. We have to decide how far the government can go in trying to protect you from your own decisions when it comes to this pandemic, which seems to be lurking around every corner waiting to pounce. And one of the issues before the courts is, can you force a hospital to give you a drug that you think will work even if your doctor forbids it? Let's consult with former State Attorney General Rob McKenna. Our conversation brought to you by Madrona Financial Services. Rob, this case is from Ohio involving a patient who wanted to be treated with Ivermectin. So what's at stake here?
There's a lot at stake here in terms of hospitals being forced by judges to administer treatments that, in their best medical judgment, aren't safe and aren't effective. But nevertheless, this county judge in Ohio issued an order forcing the hospital where the plaintiff's husband is staying to administer ivermectin. It's a drug I had not heard of before because it's an animal dewormer that has been approved for human use to address parasitic infections, but it's not an antiviral drug. Nevertheless, there are a group of physicians who some have called snake oil salesmen who are promoting ivermectin as a treatment for COVID-19 and as a drug you can take to avoid catching COVID-19. So unfortunately, the court's order it was published, but it only consisted of the order. It didn't include any kind of reasoning or any legal analysis to explain why the judge believed he had the authority and the expertise to order the hospital to do something they clearly thought was inappropriate.
So the judge ordered that he get his way. I guess his wife was arguing in his behalf. The hospital was then required to infuse him with this drug for, I think, a week or something.
Yeah, a certain number of doses per week, pretty much what he's demanding. And this is a person who is very, very sick. He tested positive on July 9th. He was admitted to the ICU at the hospital July 15th. He's been intubated, placed on a ventilator August 1. Then he developed a secondary infection. I think his wife is, desperate and is grasping at straws here. And there's a group out there that's promoting, I'll say, novel treatments, including this group called the Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, which is a nonprofit that lists this one doctor as a founding physician, this doctor who's promoting ivermectin as a treatment. And he's claiming that the FDA and CDC are engaged in a conspiracy to block the use of ivermectin because he thinks they're somehow trying to protect their use of vaccines. I don't know if he thinks that using this anti-worming or deworming drug is going to knock out vaccines, but it's a little hard to follow. But he says that they've been engaging in censorship on ivermectin's merits. And I would just point out that, the CDC and FDA have actually been pretty aggressive. And most of the criticism I've seen is that they are allowing drugs to be used that, on an emergency basis that haven't been
right. That's the whole argument against the vaccine, right?
Precisely right. That people are saying, "Oh, you can't force me to be vaccinated because it's being authorized under an emergency use authorization." Although, of course, now Pfizer drug has been fully approved. The Pfizer vaccine is fully approved. That reminded me, Dave, of all the different drugs they gave President Trump when he went to Walter Reed after he was diagnosed with COVID last year, and it reminds me that they were aggressive in his treatment and used a lot of drugs that were new and maybe, were more fairly characterized as experimental, including an antibody cocktail and other drugs. So I'm saying the CDC and FDA is not shy about trying new things, but there's a lot of evidence that ivermectin, this deworming medicine, is not only not effective in treating COVID or preventing it, but it's actually dangerous.
Right, could be poisonous. I would think in a case like this, then, the judge would have to hold the hospital harmless if this patient dies because of this forced treatment, wouldn't you think?
I would think that being under a court order to administer it would create some sort of legal immunity. But more than that, the fact the wife is insisting on it. I mean, what claim is she going to have if her husband then dies?
Right.
Except maybe a claim that, well, if he'd gotten this drug sooner, he wouldn't have died. But the problem with that argument is there's just no scientific evidence that to really back it up at all. And by the way, it appears that the individual whose wife is trying to get him ivermectin was not vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So he chose not to get vaccinated, but now his wife is trying to get him this deworming drug. It's just it's all very, very strange.
I've stopped trying to understand why people who are afraid of the vaccine are perfectly happy getting a drug that was designed for horses. But these are things that are going to remain a mystery, I think, for the rest of our lives, Rob.
Yeah, I agree. And I see my friend, the Attorney General of Ohio, is trying to stay out of it. He, according to the news coverage, he declined comment and referred inquiries to the Board of Pharmacy and Veterinary Board. It's like,
I don't blame him.
I don't either. I would duck and cover on this one, too, if I were him.
Former State Attorney General Rob McKenna. Rob, thanks very much.
Thanks, Dave.